Come join us and have your say. Let's talk about our way. Remember, you are not alone. Huda is the light in your home. We'll talk about Huda. We'll talk about our way. Come join us and have your say. Let's talk about our way. Remember, you are not alone. Huda is the light in your home.
It's 8:30 in Nigeria, 9:30 in Cairo, and I think it is 11:30 in the Gulf. But you guys know what time it is. Inshallah, it's time for Viewers Pulse. Thank you for tuning in to Viewers Pulse and for supporting Huda TV. As always, you guys know the phone number. It's live 002-0238 555 248 or 9. Of course, if you're calling from sunny Egypt, you don't have to use the country code. One more time, it's 002-0238 555 248 or 249. Let me just run the contact information by you quickly because we have a very special and distinguished guest I'm very excited about. Before we introduce him, however, let me just give you guys a Facebook, 3w's.facebook.com/Huda TV. That's 3w's.facebook.com/Huda TV. Please like and share those pages, the official page as well as all the individual program pages as well. Let's move on now to the email. It's pulse@huda.tv. That should appear on your screen now, inshallah. Pulse@huda.tv. Please send me an email and I will return it to you personally, inshallah. As well, of course, don't forget we have Skype, Huda_TV. It's a free and easy way to get your phone call in here and get yourself on the screen as well, because you can use the video cam. So now that you have our contact information, let me really talk about, introduce our guest, Dr. Mohammed Khalifa. He is a professor of educational leadership and administration at Michigan State University. He's our special guest all the way from the United States of America. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Mohammed.
Alaikum salam.
I certainly appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts about education in the Muslim world especially. But before we do that, can you just introduce yourself briefly to the viewers as well as myself and really explain what this title means, educational leadership specialist?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Hey, man, my pleasure.
It's my pleasure to be here. So education administration is a field within educational studies in general that focuses on developing the leaders of educational institutions from the teacher level. You know, teachers need to one day replace leaders, and so they need to take on leadership positions before they actually reach the level of being, for example, a building level supervisor.
Okay.
And as well, we train school leaders like principals or assistant principals or other managers or people like that. And in America, we have school districts, which are many schools put together under one sort of central administration, and so we train people at that level as well.
Okay.
And we train policymakers, people who will go work in government, and we train researchers as well. So.
Okay, excellent. Well, of course, in the United States, where you're from and where I'm from as well, we have a nationwide kind of standardized education plan and implementation of that plan. What is your opinion about the situation and status of the education and implementation of that educational plan here in the Middle East? Because Huda TV is not just an entertainment channel, we call it an edutainment channel. So we're educating viewers not just in Islamic sciences, but in a wide variety of things. So I believe it's very relevant to have you here. So please tell us about the situation of education here in the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you mentioned standardization because we ourselves as academics in the United States, we're grappling with that too. Because a lot of people discuss whether it is really great for American education because it somewhat forces all teachers to teach the exact same thing in the exact same way. And that's actually what made American education so great, the creativity, the ability of teachers to remain original and to bring novel information that might not be tested in this way. But since you did bring it up, I think it's relevant. A lot of Muslim countries are going toward standardization and tests. I visited a number of countries in the Middle East and Africa and Asia, and they're moving in that direction. But it's rarely noted that it took us in the West some time to get to that level. There are reasons that we implemented the test, and we also do different things with the test. And many of the Muslim countries I visited, they simply use it as a comparative to what student did the best, who scored the highest, who can get into the university. But that's not really how we use it in the States.
Right, okay.
The way we use it is we look at how students are testing, how they grow over time, what gaps are in the curriculum that are not being taught. Maybe it could show weaknesses in teachers, it could show weaknesses in curriculum, it could show weaknesses in maybe classroom management. So the tests are far more revealing in Western context. They tell us so much more than what I've seen used in context abroad.
Just my observation as a layman, I feel like in Asia or here in the Middle East, the children, they generally test well in math and sciences, or they lack in creativity. They're not strong in English and things like that, to literature. Whereas in the United States, we see the opposite, don't we? We generally see the children better in English and things like that, and not test well in math and science in comparison internationally, in comparison to countries perhaps in the Middle East and Asia. Why is that? Is that a problem or a weakness in the American educational system?
No. I would challenge the notion that American students don't perform well in math and science. Actually, what happens often, and it's not a fair comparison, because what often happens is that you take all American students and compare them to subsets of other countries.
Oh, okay, right.
So you say, oh, Indian students are performing better than Americans in math and science.
Right,
well, let's test all Indian students.
Okay, right. Yeah.
And then we'll really see if it's a fair comparison.
Okay, right.
But there are weaknesses, and that's part of what I do. I mean, I do reform work. I look at why institutions, why students are not doing as well, and they're complicated answers to these questions.
Right, of course, yeah.
I think that there may be a focus on rote memorization, and certainly that will take you further in the hard sciences than it will in, say, humanities or social sciences.
Exactly.
But that comes with also, the critical thinking is not always emphasized with the rote memorization. So there's some give and take.
That's a beautiful point. Thank you for mentioning that. I find in the Middle East, they teach the students to memorize texts, but there's no critical thinking skill. This is a big problem. This is one problem they have here. So how do we reform this then?
Well, I mean, it takes quite some time to reform that. What might be needed is a cultural change, and I'm not speaking of Egyptian culture. There are cultures that exist within schools.
Right. I see.
And the way educators think about education.
Yeah, right. Okay, excellent point.
This is what needs, to be reformed.
But you mentioned Egypt now. So what countries have you traveled to in particular? Egypt is one.
Yeah,
where else?
I've gone to most of the Gulf countries.
Okay.
I've gone to Morocco. I've gone to some of the West African countries. And I've been to a couple of East African countries as well.
Okay, so talk about briefly, perhaps give us a quick compare and contrast within those regions. Who are excelling in the education? What problems are they facing, for example, between the Gulf, for example, and West Africa?
Well, I want to complexize just a bit the question, because when you say who's excelling in education, one might understand that to be a function of the students themselves. Whereas if I believe, and research suggests that if any student, regardless if they're from East, West, North, Middle East, or wherever, if they're put in the right environment, they can excel. Yeah. So it's not a function of the student, right? Yeah. It's a function of the system and the opportunities they have in that system. And so I think that every country has something good to. You know what's lacking, in my view, is that people look at what America or what Western countries have become, and then they say they make the assumption that education got them there. And then they say, well, we need an education like that if we want our country to be like that country. Right. And there are 5 or 6 major assumptions along the way that can be challenged.
Right.
So first of all, education is not exclusively why the countries are like that. Look at Cuba.
Right, sure.
They excel in education, but it's one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere.
Things,
because there are political factors. Right. Then there are other very wealthy countries, and their educational systems are weak.
Right.
Okay, so this relationship between societies and education can be challenged. But I think that what countries in the Middle East need to do, and in Africa, is find out what works for them. Find out what works for them, what their strengths are. Right. Take something good from the West, but if you want to take a technology of the West, we've been talking a lot about testing. That's a technology. Right. There's a very cultural and historical reason that Americans test in the way they do. If you want to take that, you need to take everything that comes with that as well, not just the tool.
Right.
And start tech.
Dr. Muhammad, you made an excellent point, but I find here in the Middle East, there's no confidence in education. What they want to do is they want to mimic exactly how they perceive education in the West. And I always tell them, what you say, teach to your strength, cultivate and develop your strength, but they have no confidence in their own educational system, so they look outside to adopt outside systems. So I believe that this is a problem. Throughout your travels, what is the model Muslim country with regards to education? You've traveled to the Far East, the Middle East, Africa. What is the model Muslim country with regards to education?
I'm really personally impressed with two places that I have not visited, but I know through research and through literature, and that is Malaysia and Turkey.
Okay, interesting. Why? Why Malaysia and Turkey? Why?
From what I gather and from what I read, it seems as though they have a nice mix of, on the one hand, modernity, social, cultural science, and also I have students from all of these countries right at Michigan State.
Okay.
Michigan State University happens to be one of the most international universities in America, right, in terms of our relationships around the world, and in terms of our student body, very diverse. And they're also of my strongest students, believe it or not, when I compare them, West African students too. But in terms of education inside of a country, from what I gather, they have a very nice mix of secular knowledge, if one might describe it that way, and Islamic knowledge.
That's all I want to hint at. Thank you for bringing that up. That was actually my next question. We're going to take a short break. You guys at home, stay tuned. We're here with Dr. Muhammad Khalifa from Michigan State University. This still is Viewers Pulse. Of course, we're talking about education, and we're going to be previewing possibly a new show from Dr. Muhammad regarding education. So I know you parents have been calling in and asking for these types of programs. So this is the program for you, inshallah. So you guys stay tuned for more Viewers Pulse.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose whom He wills subhanahu wa ta'ala for His mercy, for His messengership, for the revelation to be revealed. This is not for the human beings to make that decision. If a person would turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely, truthfully, asking for forgiveness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised to forgive. We have as Muslims a duty, and that is to recite the book of Allah, to ponder over the verses, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to act according to the Quran. The mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encompasses everything, but who would this mercy will be for? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent to all mankind. So the ummah, or the people of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are all mankind since the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam till the day of judgment. Why waste our life without getting to know every verse in the Quran, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us?
Anger and violence have spilled over onto the
escalated into violent clashes between police and protesters.
over the government's plan to avoid default.
And we're also hearing of injuries on both.
Journalist Charlie McGrath says the cuts will heap further suffering on ordinary people.
For decades, but the fence needs some
This is a serious and big storm.
Join me as I explore pressing issues facing the Muslim world today. From the one-sided civil war in Syria to the genocide in Burma, from the Arab Spring to the elections in the US, and yes, even the Euro debt crisis in Greece. Honest reporting on a channel you can trust, and I won't leave an issue untouched. Don't miss the Ummah Tonight with me, Malik, on your favorite channel, Huda TV. All right, you guys, welcome back to Viewers Pulse. We're having a nice, interesting conversation and academic and beneficial conversation with Dr. Muhammad Khalifa from Michigan State University, a doctor in educational leadership. Very interesting. Thank you, doctor, for your time. I certainly appreciate it. We certainly hope to have you soon on a program. We do get a lot of, with a series of your own, because we have a lot of parents asking about these questions. And so it's important. Like I said, this channel is not just limited to Islamic Sciences, which is great as well, but it's an educational channel. So I want to ask you a question about teaching and education. What about teaching to the test, doctor? We see this in the States, and especially here in the Middle East. They teach directly to the test, all semester long, and the child then passes the test, and then he walks out the door and he forgets everything that he learned that he had studied for. So go ahead.
It takes the fun out of teaching. I was a classroom teacher for many years prior to becoming a professor, and it really kicked in around that time. In the 80s, they've always tested, but they became very, very adamant that students must be very, very good performers of this test, or else you can lose your job as a teacher and the principal of the school.
Oh, I see.
So it was enforced really at a level that we had not seen before. And what it did is that it took my skills. I mean, what I knew about this student was a little more advanced than that one.
Yeah.
I had to teach right in the middle, the same way
right,
to all students.
Right.
If the student didn't get something, collectively, my entire class, if they didn't understand something, I knew that I had to cover this information that was going to be on the test, so I couldn't go back and reteach it in a different way to make sure my students understood it better.
It really ruins it.
It ruins the fun of teaching.
Takes the art and skill out of it.
Yeah, and if you look at the data, the more teachers were required to teach the test, the higher turnover rate of teachers. So teachers will come in for a couple of years and then leave and go to another.
And in fact, if you remember the exit exams, it got to the point where I graduated high school in the year 2000. Just after that, they had made exit exams in California. I believe. I don't know if it's happening. Yeah.
And in some states they do that. In other words, you cannot have a high school diploma without
an exit. Okay.
Passing that test.
You know, doctor, another huge problem that we experience here in the Middle East is I find that you have very high, very expensive international schools that kind of copy what they perceive as a Western education at the expense of, like you said, the local culture, religion, and identity, or a very inexpensive Islamic education where they strictly teach Islamic sciences. Doctor, why can we have a balance between the two? What's going on?
Yeah, I think we can. I think that, first of all, the Islamic education can happen in a school that does these sciences and social sciences well. I don't see any reason why they can't have an Islamic education.
Yeah, right. Both, right.
Right. And as far as this business of Islamicizing the sciences, I've heard some people level that argument. I don't think that is a good way to go. I think that chemistry is chemistry. I mean, if you want to point out the fact that some chemist who happened to be Muslim a long time ago, or even now, that's great.
Yeah, right.
But I think that we have to hold the very highest standards for ourselves, and we should not compromise on that in any way.
Yeah, I agree.
And then there are multiple very creative ways to bring and teach the Quran, teach Hadith, or whatever the Islamic sciences you want to introduce to your students. There's no reason that it can't happen.
Yeah, great point. I couldn't agree with you more, doctor. Let's talk about now parents, their role, the community's role. Is it enough to enroll my child in a private school or a school with a high standard, or do I have to be an active parent? Do I have to be active in educating my child?
Okay. Let me preface what I want to say by saying one thing. And that's that we scholars, we strongly discourage deficit theorizing or deficit teaching, which is to blame the parents, right, for not doing enough for their kids' education. That's not what I'm here to do. But what I am going to say is that if parents got involved in their children's education and demanded more of the schools, then this could be the very engine of reform in any school in Egypt or elsewhere.
SubhanAllah.
Because if they pull the pocketbook back, they pull the money away, then obviously schools will listen. So parents have organized for years, for I'll venture to say over a century in America. They come together, hey, are you experiencing the same thing? And how about you? Come together. And they say, look, we can do better than this. We'll go to the school down the street if you're not going to. They even do that with public education in the States.
PTA or PTO, parent-teacher organization.
That's one way it happens.
Oh, right.
But there are multiple ways. Sometimes it's just an angry. I did I don't know how much time we have to talk about research, but I did a brief study in San Antonio, Texas, and they tried to close the school down. 1,000 parents showed up.
SubhanAllah.
In the gym.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Do you think they closed the school?
Not after that. Not after that.
No. So that just shows you the power of the parents and the student activists. There's nothing wrong with that. I've seen administrators and parents work together and do things that the government could never legislate. That is a very Western model, that the government will come in, will create a rule, and then that rule will happen in the schools. That doesn't have to be the Egyptian way, though. The Egyptians and other people in the Middle East can come together and demand out of a school, and change happens locally.
And I certainly hope you get you spend some more time here, because I believe the education situation here is very, very in desperate need of reform. Inshallah, it will happen. But Doctor, please give us some practical steps for parents. You've established that it's important for parents to be involved in educating their children. What are some practical steps we can take?
Sure. So for public education, as I alluded to one, and that is that parents in public schools can come and create some sort of a group. And the school is not the only place people have to meet. If we're too busy for this, we need to be honest with ourselves. But if we're not, and we're committed to our child's education, they can meet in school, out of school. Everybody's busy. But I've seen this happen myself throughout the states, in many different states. Can come together and can find out what issues their children need. You can look at the test. You can find out where the gaps are in the curriculum. My children are not learning math well. How are they going to be prepared for post-school studies or whatever? And so that's one thing. Student groups. Student groups that are run by students, but that are kind of facilitated by parents. So it could be a math group, it could be an Islamic studies group, it could be any number of groups that are important, rather, to the people at that local institution. The use of technology has to be tempered. So a lot of people will just bring a new technological device in, and start using it and say, "Oh, look, I have an iPad in the classroom." But how does that support learning?
And that's an excellent point. Our brother and the host of Tech Talk, Brother Omar Shear, he just recorded a program, episode of Tech Talk, and he spoke about this, and he spoke about monitoring the devices that you give your child to keep them away from dangerous information and content. So that was wonderful. I hope the viewers can check that out. What about, you said something really, really, really wonderful, really to the point. We have to ask ourselves as parents, do we have time? We have to look into what our child is doing and see their performance as well. So excellent point. What about community and social factors? Are there? Absolutely. Can you speak about that?
Sure. Before I leave the parent thing alone, all of your viewers are probably parents or grandparents of somebody in school. And the fact of the matter is that teachers and administrators cannot do it alone. They actually need your help, whether they know it or not. They need your assistance and they need your help. And so, and that extends to the broader community. I mean, there are business relationships. What's wrong with hiring tutors who will come in, people who graduated, to take the load off of the teacher, and the teacher can facilitate, for example, in a classroom. So where does that manpower come from? The community. Who's going to support that? Your tuition is not enough to support it. Maybe if there's a mall next door, if there's a company, there are people around who are willing to support the cause of this good.
SubhanAllah. Doctor, thank you for those excellent comments. We do have some Facebook comments. Every night I post a question online, and I posted tonight, what does Islamic media mean for you? Because this is really an educational program and benefiting, by the grace of Allah, many, many Muslims around the world. So I think, inshallah, we'll post those comments on Facebook now on the screen. Perhaps we can take a look at those. What you guys are seeing those now, we certainly appreciate your Facebook comments. Like I said, Doctor, the question was, what does Islamic media mean for you? Because Huda TV, we broadcast throughout the Middle East. In many, many, many countries. And we're looking to make more educational programs as well. Thank you guys so much for those comments. Perhaps we can have you on a program, a series, talking about education, how to educate our children, practical steps. If we can get you to do that, what specific topics? Can you just hint? We have about a minute left. What are some specific topics that you would like to address in a program dealing with education?
Well, I think that we're at a critical time in the world. Sometimes we can't see the fire. If we're down in the trees, we don't see it. We just,
nice analogy.
Right. And so I would probably craft it around reform, because change happens down at the ground level and it happens locally. And so if we can inspire people at a local level to become active stakeholders and participants in the education process, even if their children are out of school. It's still in your interest to reform your country.
Of course. Great point. In our communities.
So it will be all about reform.
Excellent. We certainly appreciate it. Really, it was a pleasure meeting you. I look forward to seeing you, soon, inshallah. You guys at home, thank you for watching Viewers Pulse. You guys don't want to miss a new program by Dr. Muhammad Khalifa about education. A lot of parents have been calling in, talking about this very topic and subject, so we believe we found the right man to talk about it. You guys, thank you for watching Viewers Pulse. Thank you for supporting Huda TV. As always, until next time, I leave you in the care of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We'll talk about Huda, we'll talk about our way. Come join us and have your say. Let's talk about our way. Remember, you are not alone. Huda is the light in your home. We'll talk about Huda, we'll talk about our way. Come join us and have your say. Let's talk about our way. Remember, you are not alone. Huda is the light in your home.